welcome. Come sit down, everyone. Sit down and enjoy the talk. Or wander around. We're not going to force you. Alright, so Libby Parker is a registered dietitian whose passion is helping college students recover from eating disorders. She holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree in nutrition science with an emphasis in eating disorders. Her private practice, called Not Your Average Nutritionist, is located in SLO, where she offers one-on-one nutrition counseling in person and virtually for eating disorder recovery. To better serve the community that cannot work with her one-on-one, Libby also offers online programs and is coming out with her first book this June called Permission to Eat. She also has a passion for working with dancers and stage performers, as a musical theater performer herself, and has an online course called Whole Health for Performers that covers many aspects of health specific to challenges that performers face. She's also been part-time faculty here at Ellen Hancock College since 2014. She's taught the Nutrition for Eating Disorders and Weight Management class. She's also the recipient of the 2017 SLO Top 20 Under 40 Award for her work in the community. So today she'll be speaking about eating disorders and eating for mental health. Let's give her a warm welcome. Thank you, Susie.
All right, so again, if you're just coming in, grab some food, grab a seat. Don't be afraid to sit up front. I don't bite, even though I am a teacher. Okay, so again, my name is Libby Parker, and today I'm going to be going over just some of the basics of eating disorders, because I think a lot of people have misperceptions about what eating disorders are, why it's a problem, what can we do about it, how can you help a friend if you think they're struggling. So I'm just going to give you a really quick overview. I love this topic. I could talk about it all day long. It's all the way up. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just talk into it louder. Okay. Yeah, so I could talk about this topic for a long time. So if you want to hear more, you can check out my website. I'll give you information at the end. And I also, again, teach the course FSN 112 here on campus. So we spend several weeks just on eating disorders and counseling skills. So if that's something that interests you, definitely check that course out next spring. All right. Okay, hopefully this will work. Okay, so I'm going to start out with some statistics here because I think there's, again, a lot of misperceptions about eating disorders. So, did you know that binge eating disorder is more common than breast cancer, HIV, and schizophrenia? Did you know that males represent 25% of individuals with anorexia nervosa, and they're at a higher risk of dying? In part because they're often diagnosed later, since many people assume males don't have eating disorders. And there's a higher incidence of males in the other types of eating disorders that we're going to talk about today. Young people between the ages of 15 and 24 with anorexia have 10 times the risk of dying compared to same age peers. This is a big problem. 97% of people with eating disorders had one or more of the co-occurring conditions. So again, these are not in a vacuum, they're not on their own, but there's a lot of co-occurring mood disorders, major depression, anxiety disorders, OCD, alcohol or substance use disorders, PTSD, self-harm, suicidal thoughts and attempts, and personality disorders like borderline personality disorder. So when someone's suffering from an eating disorder, you can't assume that it's just about the food. It's never about the food. We're going to talk more about that in a bit. All right, in a large study of 14 and 15-year-olds, dieting was the most important predictor of developing an eating disorder. Those who dieted moderately were 5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder, and those who practiced extreme restriction were 18 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than those who did not diet. So dieting is our main predictor of developing an eating disorder. Americans spend over $60 billion a year on dieting and diet products. And finally, the best known environmental contributor to the development of eating disorders is the sociocultural idealization of thinness. So again, we're dieting, we're spending lots of money on diets and diet programs and weight loss programs, and that is the greatest predictor of developing an eating disorder. So we've got a big systemic cultural problem. Okay, so I think a lot of people have some vague ideas of what eating disorders are, and I'm curious, for those of you who are actually listening to me right now, who can tell me something about an eating disorder? Like if you were to sum up eating disorders, what do you know about them? You? Do you want to say something? You saying bulimia, anorexia? Binge eating disorder? Yeah. So that could actually be any of them, the way you're describing it. Yeah, so basically a psychological issue or environmental problem that is causing issues with food and how we choose to eat. Right? Is that where you're going? Yeah. So good, good. Anyone else? When you think of eating disorders, what do you think of? Yes?
Bulimia?
Bulimia?
Yeah. Anorexia?
Anorexia? Yeah.
That's what we think of.
Does anyone have an image of a person in their mind when they're thinking about eating disorders?
Somebody's really skinny. Maybe really skinny.
Really skinny?
Looks
Yeah.
unhealthy.
It looks unhealthy? Yeah. So I think something that I didn't even get into in these slides is that you can't tell if someone has an eating disorder just by looking at them. They come in every body size. They can go from extremely emaciated to overweight and everywhere in between. They can look perfectly healthy. They can look like they have their life together. Oftentimes they're perfectionistic, so they're getting straight A's in school. They're, captain of the football team or, whatever. They look like they've got their life together on the outside for the most part. Obviously, some people are falling apart a little bit more. So again, you can't tell if someone has an eating disorder just by looking at them. All right, so you guys were doing a great job with telling me what eating disorders are. So there are 4 main types of eating disorders. There's a few more than these, but we have a really typical one when we're thinking of that underweight individual. Typically that is anorexia nervosa, which is restricting eating, not eating enough calories, not eating enough food, and typically that includes losing weight. There is a big mental block around gaining weight, feeling like they're going to get fat. Again, eating disorders are not about food, they're not about the body, but this is a behavioral coping mechanism that they are using food and their body as something to fixate on so that they don't have to deal with whatever else is going on in life. Bulimia nervosa is when someone binge eats or eats too much in a short period of time, and then they compensate by some means. So we typically think of vomiting as the way they're compensating for this in an attempt to get rid of what they've eaten. But there's a lot of different ways people compensate and what fall under bulimia. It could be over-exercising. It could be using diet pills or laxatives. It could be binging and then restricting their intake. There's a whole host of different ways that people can deal with bulimia. Binge eating disorder is the first part of the bulimia without the compensating. So they're binge eating, which means eating more food than someone typically would in a small period of time under similar circumstances. So this is not when you have that extra scoop of ice cream and you're like, oh my gosh, I ate so much. This is not Thanksgiving dinner. This is a chronic thing where you're feeling guilt and shame about what you're eating. You are numbing out, you're disassociating from what you're doing. So most people that binge eat during a binge episode don't even realize that they're doing it. It won't be until afterwards where they're like, oh my gosh, I ate all that, or they see food wrappers or something. So that's typically what's happening in binge eating disorder. And then we have other specified feeding and eating disorder. And this is a category that kind of encompasses everything else that if we can pick up on, there's a food behavior going on as a psychological coping mechanism, it probably fits in this category with a few exceptions of types of disorders I'm not going to get into today because they're much less common. But this could be something like orthorexia, that obsession with eating healthy or clean eating. So like all those clean eating diets, a lot of times they're actually fitting into this category of other specified feeding and eating disorders because it's, again, that obsession. You're not allowing your body to tell you what it actually wants. Other things that could fit into this would be chewing and spitting out food. So some people are so afraid of consuming the calories, but they want to still eat the food, so they'll chew it, and then rather than swallowing, they're spitting it out. That is an eating disorder. Get help. Thank you. Other things would be type 1 diabetics who are manipulating their insulin levels in attempts to lose weight. That also fits in this category of other specified feeding and eating disorders. And there's a whole bunch of other ones too. So really, this isn't even what I was going to talk about in this slide, but what we're going for, what the ideal is for people is that we're listening to our body, we're feeding it when our body wants food, and it's not always going to be perfectly related to hunger and fullness. Sometimes we eat because we're happy or sad or whatever, and on occasion that's okay. But we're listening to our body in terms of what it wants, how much it wants to move, when it wants to rest. Like those are all what we are hoping as humans to be able to do with our food so that we're not falling into these. Okay, so some signs of disordered eating. I covered some of that in the last slide, but I have a long list of questions here, and this is not by any means an exhaustive list, but I wanted to just go through a few of these. So you can start mulling around in your brain if you or someone you know might be struggling. So some signs would be you skip meals regularly. And not just because you're busy and you don't have a chance or you're food insecure, but you're saying, oh, if I skip lunch today, that's that many less calories I'm eating or something. You think about food more than 2 hours per day, or constantly think about previous or future meals. You start calorie counting or being obsessed with other means of quantifying food like macros or food weights or measures. You can't take days off your exercise plan even if you're sick, tired, or fun plans with friends come up. You use feeling full of food as a way to numb out or not feel emotions. You use feeling hungry as a way to numb out or not feel emotions. Your choices of what you allow yourself to eat have become fewer and fewer. You have to compensate for eating by getting rid of what you ate. Your coffee or tea, diet soda, gum consumption has drastically increased as your calorie intake decreases. You avoid eating with others because you feel anxious or judged by others about what they eat, about what you eat. You eat the same foods every day or have a really limited diet. Again, not because you're food insecure, but because you're trying to minimize how much you have to count. You chew and spit out food without swallowing to save calories. You've switched to a vegetarian or vegan diet to have an easier time turning down food or some other strict diet plan. Again, I'm not knocking vegetarian or vegan diets. They are very healthy, but do it for the right reasons, not because you're trying to cut calories. You feel out of control around food or perhaps try to avoid it. You feel guilt or shame for eating. We shouldn't have to feel those things around food. And you create new rituals around food, like cutting it into tiny pieces or only eating off of certain dishes or with specific utensils. So that's, again, not an exhaustive list, but those are things that would cause red flags for me. If someone was expressing any of those concerns to me, I would say, they're not having a great relationship with food, whether or not it would be a diagnosable eating disorder, something else is happening there. So again, eating disorders are a way to cope with something that the person wants to avoid or control. And the reason I really love working with college students specifically is that this is a big time that this comes up. Whether or not you had an eating disorder as a teenager, because again, I think when we think of eating disorders, the picture that pops into most people's minds is the emaciated white girl, right? And yeah, and that is not true. Those are the ones that are reaching out to get help, but that is not who is struggling. All races, genders, sexual orientations, ages struggle with eating disorders. But they're happening at times when something else is going on. So eating disorders are both genetic and environmental. So you have to have the genes in order to express or have the eating disorder come out. But you might have the genes and never express the behaviors of the eating disorder. It may come out as something else, like alcoholism. It's when there is an environmental trigger that the eating disorder will be expressed. So a lot of times that transition into college, you're living away from home for the first time, you're learning how to do adult things for the first time, you're in charge of your schedule. There's a lot of unknowns and things that you want to control for, and when you can't control, food's something you can control. Other life situations, so getting married, getting divorced, having a kid, changing jobs, any of that kind of stuff can be potential triggers, whether it's happy or sad occasions. These are things when we're feeling out of control, when we're trying to avoid feeling something. It could be, avoiding a conversation with someone. You have a bad relationship, and this is a way that you can kind of numb out. So, why is it a problem? This is just a few of the medical complications that we see with eating disorders. So beyond the psychological torment, the living hell that you have going on in your brain while you're thinking about food all day, you could be potentially having some of these or other ones that I've not listed here. And I'm not going to go through these because that could be another couple hours. This is something I cover in more depth in my class that I teach here. But, I mean, look at this. We've got skin issues, we've got blood issues, endocrine, hormones, thyroid, all of our organs. Especially if you're not eating enough, or if you're binge eating but not eating a mix of foods, you are in malnutrition. And if we are not getting proper nutrition, our organs are actually going to start shutting down. So this is really, really important that we are paying attention to this, and not just the people who are not eating enough, but the people who are using food for any means other than to nourish our body and mind. Again, not to mention the mental anguish you're going through on a daily basis here. So it's hard to just be social when you're in these disorders because you're so afraid of eating around other people, going out to restaurants or going to people's houses to eat, because you're constantly thinking about, what am I going to eat? How many calories is in this? Is this healthy enough? Do I eat now, or should I skip lunch if I'm going out to dinner? And there's just this barrage of thoughts going through your head. As someone who struggled with this previously myself, I can tell you this is not a fun way to live. This is torture all day long. You are constantly thinking about food. Eating disorders are also like a full-time abusive relationship. So it can be, again, really hard to be social when you've got the abusive relationship going on telling you that you can't go out, you can't have these things, you can't do this, you're ugly, you're fat, you're whatever. It is, this mental beating up all day long, and you have to, find your true self inside to overcome this. Makes it hard to focus on other things and things that are more important than food. There's a lot of things that are more important than food. I know, I'm a dietitian, I'm talking about this. There are things more important than food in life. Food is just one piece of your life, and it shouldn't take over your life, okay? Enjoy food, get a variety of it, feel good eating it, but don't let it take over your life. As eating disorders develop, so the term nervosa at the end of a lot of these words, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, that means nervousness. So anxiety is actually a part of these disorders. So whether or not you had anxiety prior to the eating disorder developing, your anxiety is going to increase. Again, going along with those thoughts. So now you've got this vicious cycle of racing brain thoughts about food all day long. Oftentimes sleep decreases. Insomnia is a very common side effect of especially anorexia, but any of the disorders. And typically you're not enjoying the things that you once loved because, again, food is taking over your life. You have no time for all the fun things that you wanted to do and passions that you had before because food has become your passion, for better or worse. Also, just a fun note, if you can call it fun, a lot of nutrition majors actually are the ones developing eating disorders, or they have an eating disorder which prompts them to become a nutrition major. I'm not going to judge you if you're a nutrition major. I'm not saying that you have one, but it's really interesting. We can't get good statistics on that, but it's pretty prevalent. I mean, the reason I got into majoring in nutrition was because I was in an eating disorder. I wonder what I would have done if I hadn't been. So I'm not going to read all the things on this slide, I'll let you guys read it, but if you've ever heard the little voice in your head say these things, you might be struggling. So a lot of times people are like, well, yeah, I have some of these issues with food, but I'm not that bad. I haven't lost a lot of weight. I haven't noticed any medical complications. I'm not as sick as that other person. I'm not sick enough to get help. I'm good. If you are struggling with any of these thoughts or behaviors, I mean, it's a weird way to put it, but you're sick enough to get help. And it's much better to catch it early than to wait until you are where you think you need to be sick enough, right? So you don't have to stay stuck. So what can we do about it? If you or someone is struggling with an eating disorder, what do we do? Actually, let me go back to that one. So if you are trying to help someone else that you think has an eating disorder, here's some tips on what you can do. So I want you to confront them carefully from a place of your care for them, how much you love them and care about them, using I statements. Has anyone ever heard of using I statements for counseling? Okay, I got one yes over here. Can you explain it?
Like in counseling?
Yeah.
I don't know, just when you're really trying to make a statement with your eyes, that's what I think of.
Okay, not eyes, but the letter I.
Oh, no.
It's like I feel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'll give you some examples. But good, yeah, I mean, body language is huge. So I like that you're going with that, because yeah, you want to convey this as well. So an example of an I statement when you're concerned about someone is, I'm concerned that I never see you eat despite how many times we all go out to dinner together. I'm really worried about you. So when we're using I statements, we're putting it on us. We're not saying you're doing a bad thing, you have a problem. We're not accusing them. We're saying I'm concerned about you, because that comes off much more approachable to someone else. And especially if they're people pleasers, which many of us are, that's something that they might actually try to do something about it if they feel that you are worried about them. Some other things that you can do as a friend or family member, you should not be the food police, okay? That is the dietitian's role, but as a parent, a family member, a friend, you're not there to judge them or force them to eat or take the food away from them. You just need to be there, sitting alongside them, listen to them, be a good friend. Don't change your relationship drastically, and don't focus on the food. Right along with that, don't focus on weight, body shape, dieting. Don't talk about how bad you're being for eating the brownie or needing to work off something. Like, we need to just, as a society, change the way we're talking about food in our bodies, because it's just fueling everyone else. And if we look at even pop culture, like, who's seen the movie Mean Girls? Okay, all the girls have seen the movie Mean Girls. But in there, I think it's there's a great example in there of, all the plastics are in her bedroom, and they're standing in front of the mirror and they're talking about all of their flaws, like, oh, I have big shoulders, and all these things, and it's so sad how true that is. I think Tina Fey did a great job portraying that, because you get a bunch of, especially girls together, but people, and we start kind of picking apart ourselves. It's not even so much about picking on other people, we're putting ourselves down. And when other people hear that, they think that it's okay and that they need to put themselves down too. This is something that we need to change as a society. This is something that every single person in this room can do, even if you do nothing else from this talk today. I want you to start talking to yourself with more compassion, especially out loud, but even in your head to yourself. Think about how awesome you are. Think about what your body does for you. Think about all the things that make you unique, a wonderful human being. Try not to focus on the flaws. We can always nitpick our flaws, and we are our own worst critic. But if you are putting it out there that you are not putting yourself down, you are not putting other people down, that's what's going to make change in our society. All right, so let's say that you've identified that you need help or your friend needs help. What kinds of help are out there? So this looks very intimidating. Not everyone needs all these things. This is just throwing it all up there. So when someone first identifies that they might be struggling with food, they don't know if they have an eating disorder, but something's up, they want to make a change, they want to get healthier, choosing one of the professionals on the right side of your left. There you go. I can talk. Choosing one professional on the left side of the screen is a great way to get started here, because they're going to be the ones that can assess and identify do you have an eating disorder? Is there something going on? Is what you're doing normal? And they can help you figure out what level of care you need, if there are other professionals that you need to be working with, and really help you to make peace with food, your body, your mind, and whatever else is going on. So I really would suggest everyone should have a primary care physician of some type that you're going to for a well check, I hope. If you have other medical conditions, you're probably seeing them more frequently, but establish yourself with a doctor regardless. I don't care, eating disorder or not, everyone should be established with some sort of medical professional. And then if you are thinking that you have an issue with your food behaviors, see a dietitian or a therapist who specializes in eating disorders. Not all of them do. It is something that we have to do extra training after college to really understand. So if you get someone who's a generalist, or like, oh yeah, I work with eating disorders, but then they're promoting weight loss, that's not the person you want to work with. So finding a dietitian or a therapist that specializes in eating disorders, go talk to them. They're going to help identify, are you struggling? What do you need? If you do need to be working with both of them at the same time, typically they can make referrals back and forth, so you don't need to do all the searching yourself. Occasionally, a psychiatrist will be needed, especially if there are psychiatric medications that you need to deal with. Not everyone does. In fact, eating disorders in general do not have any psychiatric medications like antidepressants that are FDA approved for use of that, because if you're not nourished, your brain is actually not going to be, or you're not getting enough carbohydrates and tryptophan or tyrosine, one of the amino acids of the tea, to actually make enough serotonin that antidepressants are going to be working. So you're going to need to be eating before some of those meds can kick in. But if you're dealing with something else like bipolar disorder, you may be on other medications too. So psychiatrists may be needed, most people don't. And then some other optional resources would be a recovery coach or support groups. So those are people that are not medical professionals, but they can help keep you going and motivated in between sessions with your other professionals. So on the right side of this slide is different levels of care that eating disorders get into. And again, the earlier that we catch this, the less you're going to have to deal with this. So that's a really good thing, and the less expensive, because as we go down the list, it gets crazy expensive, and hopefully your insurance covers it, but that's something else that we need a lot of legislative work on. So our lowest level of care is the outpatient level. That's the type of work I do. So the person is, having a pretty normal life. They're going to work or school. They live at home. They're making their own food, and they're seeing these professionals, maybe once a week or every other week, and kind of piecing together their own treatment team. So most people will start at this level, and depending on if it's getting worse or better, they may need to jump up to the next level here. So our next level of care, I'm going to talk about the next two kind of together. So intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization. These are day treatment programs, so the individual would still be living at home. They probably can't do work or school, or they have to be very limited in how much they can do, because they're going to be spending the majority of their day at the program where they're in therapy, they're doing meal groups, they're in therapy groups, they might be doing other equine therapy or art therapy or things like that. But it's 3 to 9 hours a day depending on the program and level you need, so that's pretty up there for still living at home. If you're really in a place where you can't be trusted to take care of yourself, you're very malnourished, you're going to do other behaviors like over-exercise when left to your own devices, residential would be the next step up, and so you'd be living at the treatment facility doing, again, basically all the same things that's happening at the intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization, but you're there 24 hours a day. And then inpatient is when someone is medically unstable. So they're in a hospital, they might be getting a tube feed, they might be getting fluids intravenously. They're not working on your mental health at this stage, they are just keeping you alive. So try to avoid this one. All right. So I think this is a really important point I make no matter what presentation I'm giving. So there's a difference between registered dietitians and nutritionists. All registered dietitians are nutritionists. Not all nutritionists are registered dietitians. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but there is a difference in credentialing, the education level. Literally anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. You are all nutritionists. There you go. Just, again, if you're working with someone on your nutrition, especially if you're dealing with something very complex like an eating disorder or a medical condition like diabetes, you want to be working with a registered dietitian. Okay, and another point here is I want you to be your own health advocate. No one else knows what's going on in your head. We're not following you around 24 hours a day, so if you're struggling with something, whether it's an eating disorder or something else, you need to speak up. You need to tell your health professionals what's actually going on, because we can't test for everything. You have 15 minutes in a doctor's appointment. Most of them are not asking questions about food, body image. They're looking at your weight and saying, you need to lose a couple pounds, which can be extremely triggering to people who have an eating disorder. So you need to speak up and say, hey, I have these issues. I want to figure out more about this. I think I need help for this. Can you help me? Just got a few more slides here. Thanks for sticking with me. So when you're going to an appointment, especially if it's going to be a really fast one, like those 10, 15-minute doctor appointments, I really suggest writing down a list of your concerns, especially if you're nervous to talk to someone about this. Writing it down, if you get too scared in the moment to actually bring it up, you can just pass them this paper and be like, here are the things I'm doing. I'm exercising 4 hours a day, and I'm only eating this much, and I'm doing these things. That can make it a lot easier to open up that discussion. All right. Oh, I already talked about these ones. Okay, so what can colleges do? So this is a special passion of mine, is helping colleges figure out what they can be doing to help identify and get help for people with eating disorders. So the Body Project is a cognitive dissonance-based group program. It's a lot of fancy words for saying we're trying to match up your actions and your thoughts together, and when we're in dissonance, they're separate. So the Body Project is something that was developed primarily for colleges and large groups, and we can train facilitators in it who lead peer educators. So that is something that the college could look more into. I think we could start one down here. Hire health staff that specialize in eating disorders. This is something that most colleges do not do. They have their generalists, which are fabulous. I'm so glad that there are health services on this and many other college campuses. But we, especially if we're seeing a problem among the students, there needs to be either people on site or people that they can make easy local referrals to that specialize in eating disorders. Teach other staff what to look for in eating disorders and how to address it. I'm not going to spend time on this one today, but it's important. I know it's just like suicide prevention in that sense. Don't hold weight loss challenges. I think, this is something I see more in corporate wellness than colleges, but we don't want to be holding these health challenges like, who can lose the most weight in 30 days or whatever. That's really not good, because the people who are going to win that are the people that are already struggling and really don't need to be doing that. Don't take students' weights or BMI just to get a baseline or to run statistics for the school. Again, getting people to step on scales can be extremely triggering and sends the message that weight is important. It's really not that important. Focus on mental health advocacy. I think that's enough said. Participate in suicide prevention training. Again, eating disorders have really high risks of suicide, particularly among anorexia and in the LGBTQ plus community. So we need to really be paying attention to that, especially in this population. Teach from a health at every size philosophy. This is something that I was talking to a group of college students online from all over the world, and they were all talking about the classes that they're taking for various health majors or just their basic health classes that they're taking at school, just as a GE requirement. And pretty much all of them focus on calories, weight, obesity, how obesity is an epidemic, that we need to watch out for this, and they're taking their weight in class and all this stuff. And I even taught this initially too. So this is something that needs to change, because there is a really great movement going on called Health at Every Size. And the premise behind that is not that you are healthy at every size, but you can focus on your health no matter what your size is. And that most health things have nothing to do with weight. You can fix diabetes without losing weight. You can fix high cholesterol without losing weight. It's really not about the weight. This is something where we just need to focus on, are you eating a varied diet? Are you getting movement in your day? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you, brushing your teeth? Like very basic health things are what's going to make a difference in people's lives. And then educate on the dangers of dieting and what it can lead to. I think our nutrition professors do a really great job of that here, and I think that's something that, again, needs to be taught across the board at all colleges. So some take-home messages before I get into eating for mental health. Foods are not good or bad. All foods have a place in the diet unless you have an allergy to them or like a religious reason not to eat something. It's okay. You can eat it, Nothing is off limits here. And when you can trust yourself to eat what sounds good, you're not going to binge on it because it's always available. Get proportions in order. You don't need to calculate how much, carbs, proteins, fats you're eating, but trying to getting a variety of food and not eat just one thing or the other is really good. Don't diet. I think I covered that enough today. And space your food out over the course of the day rather than just eating 1 or 2 meals. Your body is actually going to better absorb and utilize the nutrients if you're spreading it out. So that kind of, takes down the intermittent fasting sort of thing. Works for some people, but in general, our bodies really like the food spaced out. So you're worthy right now, just as you are. I love that you laughed at that. No, this is a true thing. I'm being serious here. So yeah, I love this quote from Sarah Silverman. Mother Teresa didn't walk around complaining about her thighs. She had shit to do, right? Don't focus on your body. Don't focus on food. There's so much more stuff that we need to be focusing on. Okay, so I have a couple bonus slides here because you guys came here to probably learn more about actual nutrition and not just about eating disorders. So this is kind of across the board, eating disorder or not. I'm going to just talk a little bit about some foods for anxiety and depression. So these are things that I like to cover with my own clients. So first one is omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. So again, we're finding these in like walnuts, flaxseed, fish oil, fatty fish. They've been the focus of several studies on depression. Let's see. So one study specifically linked the lack of omega-3 in the diet with an increased likelihood of depression, and other studies looked at supplemental omega-3 fatty acid supplements and the reduction of depression. Additionally, the diets of people that we see in Nordic countries, Mediterranean and Japanese, they have the least rates of depression, and they all have much higher than average omega-3 fatty acids in their diet. So again, that's not confirming that, but it's showing those dietary patterns do tend to have a good effect on mental health. Up next we have probiotics. So probiotics are the beneficial bacteria in fermented foods such as yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. There's also supplements that you typically find in the refrigerated section with live and active cultures. So that's what we're looking for. These bacteria seem to create a change in certain parts of the brain, especially with our limbic activity. So the limbic system is part of the brain, and they decrease depression. So along with our probiotic foods, we want to focus on eating prebiotic foods, which are things that are really high in fiber, like fruits, veggies, nuts, whole grains. So you ate a lot of that for lunch today. Give yourself a hand. You are fighting depression right now. All right? No one cares. All right, last one. Again, along with those prebiotics, we have B vitamin foods. So again, most of the foods that you're eating today, whole grains, legumes, fruit, nuts, seeds, veggies, these all have high amounts of B vitamins. And then if you do not eat animal products, you want to make sure that you're getting a source of vitamin B12 in. You're probably going to need a supplement for this. B12 is only found in animal products and nutritional yeast as food products. So if you're not eating those on a daily basis, I would suggest a supplement for that. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. So these are all foods that are helping with anxiety and depression. Overall, we want to eat a nice balanced diet. I'm sure most of you, because you're here, you're interested in nutrition, you've seen the My Plate model. This is very similar. This is the model from Harvard Medical School. It's just a little less biased than the USDA My Plate, but same idea. So thank you so much for staying and listening. I really appreciate coming to talk to you all today. I just wanted to tell you how you can get in touch with me, especially if you took pictures or video today. Please tag me in social media. I'm at Dietitian Libby. You can email me. I have some business cards up here, and my website is notyouraverage.nutritionist.com. And as Cece said at the beginning, I am publishing a book this June. It's called Permission to Eat, and it's a self-help style recovery book for eating disorders, and it's aimed particularly at college students. So I'm talking about things that you guys are facing right now, and it would be a great graduation gift if you have high schoolers graduating as well. You have a question? Okay, the question was, how much kombucha can you drink? I don't think there's been any studies on what upper limits of that would be. I mean, with any food, no matter, include, however healthy it is, so you can overdo it on carrots, you can overdo it on kombucha. So just think about, I think it's Hippocrates that said the dose makes the poison with what you're eating. So if you're having, 1 or 2 bottles a day, that's not going to hurt you. If that's like all you're consuming, that may be a problem. So I think, having normal amounts like you would with other beverages, totally fine. Does anyone else have questions? Yes?
What was that she asked? I didn't hear the question.
She was asking how much kombucha you can have per day.
What's kombucha?
Kombucha is a fermented beverage. It's fermented tea. I'm not the best person to talk about it. I don't know a ton about it, but yeah, it's got a good source of probiotics in it.
Oh, okay.
Anyone else have questions about eating disorders, nutrition in general, what dietitians do? Yes?
When is your book going to be out?
When is my book going to be out? The potential launch date is June 4th. It'll be available on Amazon. So hoping that stays true. It's in editing right now. But I have an email list for that if you want updates on when it's coming out. Does anyone else have questions? So, all right, thank you so much for having me today, everyone. I really appreciate being up here.